I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it is 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. It's 4 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak has sacked Nazim Zahawi from the government after an ethics inquiry found he had committed a serious breach of the ministerial code. The former Tory party chairman has been facing questions over his tax affairs after admitting that he'd paid a penalty to HMRC for an error linked to shares in polling company YouGov. In a letter, Mr Zahawi told the Prime Minister he'll continue to support the government from the backbenches. MP Jacob Rees-Mogg says he has sympathy for him.
The report seems to show that he made some technical errors with his declarations under the ministerial code, and the Prime Minister has decided that they were serious enough to fire him. So I feel sorry for Nadeem Zahawi, but I think that after it dominating the headlines for a week, the rule of politics is that if you do that, it's very hard to remain in office.
Well, Labour Party Chair Annalise Dodds says there are questions for the Prime Minister.
What did he know and when about that enormous settlement that Nadeem Zahawi was negotiating with HMRC and the huge penalty that he had to pay? Why did Rishi Sunak say in Parliament that all questions had been answered about this affair? And why on earth is the Prime Minister holding up this rogues gallery of Conservative ministers with others who obviously have broken security rules, who are subject to allegations of very serious bullying, and yet the Prime Minister seems too weak to act against them?
A 16-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of a teenage girl in Hexham. 15-year-old Holly Newton was stabbed in the Priest Popple area of the town on Friday and died in hospital. A 16-year-old boy was also injured in the attack. The accused, who can't be named for legal reasons, has also been charged with attempted murder and possession of an offensive weapon. The Housing Secretary has admitted that faulty government guidance allowed the Grenfell Tower tragedy to happen. Michael Gove says the whole system of building safety wasn't policed effectively enough. He's expected to announce a 6-week deadline for developers tomorrow, forcing them to sign a contract to fix their unsafe homes or be banned from building new ones. The fire at the residential tower block in West London killed 72 people in 2017. Boris Johnson was reportedly told to stop asking Richard Sharp for advice about his personal financial matters just 2 weeks before he was announced as the new chair of the BBC. According to the Sunday Times, Mr Johnson, who was Prime Minister at the time, was warned to stop discussions in December 2020. Mr Sharp, a former banker, is facing calls to resign after it emerged that he introduced the former PM to a guarantor for a loan. The government will publish an urgent emergency care plan tomorrow to try to tackle pressures on the NHS. It comes as the Health Department announced plans to build virtual beds, caring for tens of thousands of elderly and vulnerable people in their own homes. The Health Secretary admitted there was no quick fix, but said shifting care away from hospitals will reduce waiting times. However, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has accused the government of sticking plaster politics.
It seems we've gone from 40 new hospitals to hospitals at home. I think a lot of people will say, well, how will I be able to be treated in my own home if the government's half the number of district nurses who are essential to provide support in the community? I think this is a government that's run out of steam, run out of ideas, and isn't able to deal with the fundamental problems of the NHS, and so they're resorting to sticking plasters.
Dame Esther Ranson has revealed she's been diagnosed with lung cancer, but says she's remaining optimistic. The 82-year-old admitted it's been difficult keeping her diagnosis a secret and says she wanted to share the news in her own words. Last year, the broadcaster received a Lifetime Achievement Award for her charity work, and she was made a DBE in 2015 for her services to children and older people through Childline and the Silver Line. The head of the Welsh Rugby Union has resigned amid allegations of a toxic culture within the governing body. Steve Phillips' decision comes after the WRU announced an external task force will investigate claims of misogyny, sexism, racism and homophobia in the institution. Former Wales winger Nigel Walker has become acting CEO and has warned of an existential crisis for Welsh rugby ahead of the Six Nations. Novak Djokovic has won his 10th Australian Open tennis title. Emotions ran high after the Serbian beat Greece's Stefanos Tsitsipas in straight sets, 6-3, 7-6, 7-6. The 35-year-old now holds 22 Grand Slam titles, equalling Rafa Nadal's record, and he's reclaimed his position as world number one. Djokovic returned to the tournament after being denied entry last year for failing to follow Australian COVID rules. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Hospitals at home. I know. Let's take something that isn't working and turn it on its head into something that definitely won't work. Hospitals at home. Well, that will solve the problem of bed blocking, because the sick can stay at home and then be visited by the nurses and monitored at home. And the well, who don't need a bed, can stay in hospital. Then the sick won't need to wait for a bed taken by somebody who's perfectly well. Because, frankly, we haven't solved the problem at the other end, which is bed blocking. I want to like the idea of not going to hospital, but why do I feel like I smell a rat? Perfectly well individuals in hospital and the sick at home. You know when you call for an appointment and they offer you a call back from the doctor or a remote appointment? Well, how well does that work out for you? In my experience, they're pretty poor. But let's be fair, let's examine the idea to relieve pressure on the NHS. So the idea is more than 500,000 people will be treated at home. Elderly and frail patients who fall, for example, will be treated by video link. Does that mean they'll be left where they've fallen? Sounds pretty impractical to me. A few questions. What if they don't have a webcam or even internet? Who hooks up the video link? And if they've fallen and are immobilised, how will they operate the equipment? And if they don't have a computer, who will pay for it? Although, to be fair, the last time I looked, it cost over 500 quid per day to stay in hospital, so possibly buying them a computer is probably cheaper. Look, I actually quite like the idea because I'd rather stay at home any day than go to hospital. But I'm a bit concerned that the elderly and frail patients, who, in my view, are one of the most vulnerable groups, will be left to fend for themselves. I mean, granted, most elderly people want a sense of independence, but my worry is even though the monitoring will be apparently 24/7, that they'll be left on their own when further assistance may well be needed. For example, if they've fallen, who will help them to the bathroom? Who will make their meals? How will they clean their house? Normal, practical, day-to-day things can be very difficult when you're incapacitated. And this idea, although it seems good because it's happening in some places like Warwickshire, where patients can arrange a video call and paramedics can be sent to them and work out the best course of action, the Telegraph actually reported that this led to a 16% reduction in the number of over 75s who were taken to hospital. And there are other similar versions of this. It's also been trialled in London in October last year, where a community nurse was sent out with paramedics, which were able to cut the likelihood of going to A&E in half. But I'm sceptical because I believe more attention needs to be placed on the root of the problem, which is bed blocking and ultimately social care. May I suggest that the government solve the problem rather than tucking in the edges? Right, so before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can you now trust the Tories? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has sacked the Tory party chairman Nadeem Zahawi after an inquiry found that he breached the ministerial code. And last week it emerged that Zahawi paid a penalty in the millions to HMRC over unpaid tax. So this signal, does it change for you, for the government? And then at 4:50, it's Worldview. Russian expert Danny Armstrong will be live in the studio. The Prime Minister has said that the hearts of the British people are with Ukraine, and this all comes as the year anniversary of when the war started fast approaches. Then stay tuned at 5, it's this week's Outside. Our special celebrity guest is known as a competitive swimmer and competed in the Olympics, Commonwealth Games and the World Championships. He's also been a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing. Can anyone guess who he might be? Stay tuned, you'll find out just after 5. That's on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. It's the aircon, it gets down my throat. I've told them to turn it down. Heads will roll, you wait till afterwards. All right, so let's get started. Welcome again to my panel, broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton and broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right, so first I want to start with the topic of the whole hospitals at home. Danny, I mean, look, they'd have to hoist you out if they take... Well, we talked about that last week, didn't we?
They would need a cherry picker with a mega, ultra, extra-wide lens. Look, the problem is that you're right, Nana. My mother and father-in-law, for example, they don't have broadband. So they have clunky old phones which just suits them fine. They text and they make phone calls. They're not into WhatsApp or video calling. So God forbid, should someone in the house fall, maybe they're going to be able to get the landline and then they're going to be sent a link which they won't be able to open, they won't be able to use. But if you fall, if you are of a certain age and you have a catastrophic fall, something that wouldn't really, you'd brush it off if you were in your teens. But when your bones are more brittle and fragile, you're going to be in excruciating pain. And I can't see how this video link is going to really... Why are you smiling at me? My fat face won't fit in it. I can't say how the video link... What they're going to show her...
He said it.
I'm just preempting her. Nana and I have this chemistry where I can just about predict what she is thinking.
He's right,
but I say it. So I think that's going to be difficult to work. But what I would say, Warwickshire is my home county, and that's where the trial is. So if 16% reduction in A&E visits, OK, that's a great thing. The fire engine, the fire department, West Midlands Fire Department, or fire, whatever, that sounds very American, they trialled something a couple of years ago where if someone reports a fire 999, they're sent a link to their smartphone and they actually show the fire brigade the fire.
Oh, wow.
So technology, And third-party face-to-face technology has been used before with the emergency services. So maybe we should give it some time. But you're right, bed blocking. You know, if there's not a bed there, it's pointless.
It will solve that, because, I mean, I quite like the idea of, you know, not having to go to hospital. That's great. But the underlying problem is the bed blocking, and they haven't solved it, Christine.
Yeah, the underlying problem is the bed blocking, bed blocking. Too much money is spent on managers and bureaucrats. That's the other problem. But I think to this new plan, I can see certain instances when it would work. I mean, you have an elderly person who falls, they've got young people at home. You can easily see a paramedic comes and says, actually, you don't need to go to hospital. You've got somebody here who can look after you. You've got the technology at your disposal. I can see this helping. I've no idea what figures, whether the figures that are quoted in this article are sensible. But I can see that working as an adjunct. But the main problem, I mean, I've begun to think, you know, you send something to a royal commission and it gets kicked into the long grass, but I think the NHS is so severely badly managed at the moment, and the money is badly spent. It's got out of control. It's become this, it's the new religion, you know, you can't touch it. But I think people at last are realising that they've got to do something fundamental, and I think something like a Royal Commission to really get to the bottom of how we solve this, and it is not just throwing more money at it. So maybe this actually could help, in certain circumstances, ease the pressure on A&E.
May I just add?
Not for your mother-in-law.
No, may I just add, though, if it does work, why don't we just roll it out to all 999 calls? So you may have someone who's fallen over, they've had a few too many pints Saturday night, and they've smacked their head, and there's blood pouring out of the eye socket or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to be too graphic. So they call 999. Normally they'd get an ambulance taken immediately. But then the ambulance say, OK, well, let's just have a little look at it. OK, well, we can actually see it looks worse than it is. What we'd like you to do is just a triage.
What we'd like you to do is wipe the blood off the camera so we can see it properly.
But do you see what I mean? You could roll it out to a lot of other 999. Why old people? Why
I'm not opposed to the idea that a lot of things could be done from home. I like that. But my point is this. Attack the underlying problem initially, and then you can start doing all these add-ons, because as that MP said, it's like a sticking plaster. There's a wound, you're not going to treat the wound, you're just going to put a plaster on top. Deal with the thing first. The bed blocking is the issue. Find a way of getting well people out of hospital so there's room for the sick.
But this video business does work. Neil fell off a ladder 2 or 3 years ago and he cut his head really badly. And we were going for dinner that evening with somebody who's a surgeon. So I photographed it. And I said, Jeremy, should we come? Can you deal with this? Or should I take him to A&E? And he said, I can deal with it. So it was a classic example of how using a little bit of sort of modern technology saved a visit to A&E.
And a classic
neighbour who's a surgeon.
A classic way to...
No, we had to drive about an hour.
A classic way to avoid a 10-hour wait at A&E as well.
Indeed.
It's the people you know, Mrs Hamilton.
Oh,
yes,
isn't it?
That just...
how about that?
Problem.
He's retired now.
Oh, I see.
But still, the underlying problem, if they got rid of a situation where you've got perfectly well people in beds that they don't need, then you don't need to worry about all this, and that can be an add-on and improve the system. But that's what they need to solve. And whilst I applaud the ingenuity of coming up with different schemes, and I think that there is a place for it, the place for right now is looking at solving the problem of bed blocking, and they're not doing that.
And spending the money more wisely.
May I just go back a few years when Boris Johnson announced there would be 50 more hospitals?
Yes, it did, didn't
it? Was it 40, I think, 50?
40, I think it was... OK, let's go with 40. Some of which were brand new, some of which were enhanced on previous sites. So, hopefully, they are making progress on that. I know they are. So, hopefully, when that is achieved, if or when it's achieved, then we won't necessarily be so concerned about bed blocking.
More people. They're never going to catch up with the number of... Especially, you've got people coming over the channel, you've got the population, large... Ageing population. That's not going to solve it. They actually need to deal with the bigger problem of bed blocking.
And also, people need operations now that they couldn't have had 10 or 20 years ago. They want their new knees, their new hips, their new hearts, their new... We'll be having new eyes shortly, completely new eyes, new this. So there is no limit to the amount of money that can be spent on the health service. No limit at all. It's got to be better organised.
And that is the main thing. So I think they really need to address the situation, the bed blocking stuff. Now,
but I think this is an interesting idea, using Zooms at home for a bit, for certain circumstances.
Danny using good ideas. Well, I think I deal with the bed blocking. What's wrong with Danny? Why is he doing that funny face?
Zoom, it's just...
It's Sunday afternoon.
It's the Nana effect.
Zoom.
OK.
Right, so... Right, well, we'll be discussing that. Make sure you get in touch with all your thoughts with regard to bed blocking. Now, last week we had a conversation, didn't we, Christine, with a situation where we made a conversation, we discussed something and some people were offended.
We did. We had a discussion about obesity, and I understand that a remark that I made on the show has upset some viewers. I don't know how many, not many, I don't think. We were having a lively discussion about obesity, and I made a comment about a concentration camp that was deemed inappropriate. Shouldn't have happened, and I'm sorry, and I apologise to those viewers who I've offended.
Thank you very much, Christine. Right, so listen, what are your thoughts? As ever, stay with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is at GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, can you now trust the Tories? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has sacked the Tory party chairman, Nadeem Zahawi, after an inquiry found that he breached the ministerial code over his tax affairs. So are the Tory party leading with more integrity? What do you think? Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. I've got a poll up right now on Twitter asking you that very question. Can you now you've seen Rishi Sunak in action, can you trust the Tories? Cast your vote now. That's on the way after this.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, welcome. It's just coming up to 21 minutes after 4 o'clock. We are the People's Channel. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before the break, we were discussing the possibility of hospitals at home. Well, let's see what you've been saying. Michelle says, dear Nana, isn't this what older people paid into their pension for? Some of them for 50 years. Exactly. They didn't really pay for that, did they? They paid to have care, proper care. Catherine says, am I the only person who believes that if they reopen cottage hospitals where patients used to go for rehabilitation, the problem, what on earth will be solved? What on earth is going on with the health board? Yeah, I don't know what they're thinking. Diane said, get rid of the diversity manager, etc. Reinstate convalescence homes. Right, exactly. Get rid of the bed blocking, reinstate convalescence homes. People can go there and you've got beds for people who are actually ill. I don't know. Well, it's time now for our Great British Debate, and I'm asking, can you trust the Tories? Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has sacked Nadeem Zahawi from his government position as Tory party chair after an inquiry found that he breached the ministerial code. Now, he had come under fire over his tax affairs after admitting that he paid a penalty worth millions to HMRC. He described it as a careless mistake. And last year, Rishi Sunak promised to lead the country with integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level in his opening speech as Prime Minister. So is Rishi Sunak living up to his promise? Does this sacking signal a change in the way the government are operating? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can you now trust the Tories? I'm joined by former Labour MP Stephen Pound, former Brexit Party MEP and political commentator Belinda de Lucy, former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire, and also political commentator Reem Ibrahim. Right, I'm going to start with you, Belinda de Lucy. Does this signal some sort of change?
Well, I'm not sure about that because although I know Rishi thinks he's done an incredibly Herculean move by sacking Nadeem, there are many other reasons and areas why trust is lacking towards the Conservative Party. I think Rishi did the right thing, though, by waiting for an independent investigation. I do think we live in a climate where the media can pounce on the next scalp, demanding their demise. And I think it'd be wrong to just, sack someone on the basis of that. So based on the investigation, and then when the evidence was utterly, unequivocal, to then go through with the sacking, yes, fantastic, well done, Rishi. But on so many other areas, he's so weak. And in so many other areas, the Conservative Party has been so untrustworthy. However, I don't think it's a uniquely Conservative thing. I think had Labour been in power for the last 12 years, we've seen a similar amount of misconduct. Power corrupts at the end of the day, and the Conservatives have been in for a long, long time. So we've just seen it more with them than we have with any other party.
OK, Scarlett Maguire, what do you think?
Clearly, Rishi should have sacked Nadil Zahawi as soon as he discovered that Zahawi had not been completely frank about his tax. It did not need an investigation to find out that Zahawi had not told Rishi Sunak everything that he knew and had not said that, yes, when he was Chancellor, he was being investigated, had not said that he'd sent threatening letters to a journalist who was inquiring about it, that although I agree that quite often process should go on, for instance, looking at Dominic Raab, we need to make sure that he really did bully the 24 people who are accusing him of it, and we want to do it. With Zahawi, it was a matter of Rishi actually being weak and not sacking him when he should have been. So no, I mean, look, there are still. I mean, I listed the number of investigations that are going into what's wrong with the Conservatives, and let alone, starting to go down the line of can we trust them on the economy? I mean, the answer is no.
Interesting, but you're a great leader, Keir Starmer. I mean, the Labour Party aren't sort of that much better from what I can see, but I would concede that I probably would have sacked him.
Tell me the bullying. Tell me the problem with the tax affairs. Actually, at the moment, there is nothing that we can pick up in the Labour Party where there are any conflicts of interest. I mean, I've been
really no, you can't get away with that. There are loads of conflicts of interest. I would say in most parties. I don't think you can really say that and think that is 100% correct. I mean, there's been quite a few issues.
We're talking about a man who was Chancellor of the Exchequer, who was running the tax affairs of this country at the same time as he was being investigated and had to pay a fine of over £1 million.
Listen, I'm not defending him. Listen,
that money.
I'm not defending him. I'm just saying that I don't think the Labour Party are.
I mean, it's just not true in the Labour Party. That's
not with regard. I mean, I don't know about with regard to tax, but I'm just saying that both parties have their own crosses to bear. I'm going to come to Reem Ibrahim.
Well, I mean, I am a libertarian, so I'm not inclined to trust any government at all, let alone the Conservative or Labour government. But I think that Rishi Sunak was right to wait until the independent investigation in order to fire Nadeem Zahawi. I think that Belinda's right. I think we tend to sort of throw our hands in the air and point fingers at whoever we wish to in the media. And I think it's definitely right to just wait until we get that official investigation so that we know all of the facts. But again, look, whether or not we can actually trust the Tories, I mean, we've seen the amount of scandals that we've had over the past few years, but can we actually even trust them to be Conservative? I mean, we can't trust them to actually do what the name of the party is. We've got the highest taxes in 70 years. We've got various other issues within government policy that unfortunately aren't being fixed. So no, I don't trust the Tories because I don't trust any government.
Well, I mean, it's difficult to trust any of them. Stephen Pound.
Yeah, I'm a fairly trustworthy person, but look, you can rely on the Tories to make a complete horlicks of everything at the moment. Doesn't matter what they do, they just seem to have his King Midas in reverse. Look, Nadeem Zahawi has actually still got the Tory whip. He's still going to stand as Conservative probably at the next election because he's very popular in his local constituency. And yet again, Rishi Sunak has made himself look weak weak. I mean, you should have. I remember meeting Nadeem Zahawi a few years ago when we were both working in the gasworks, and he was wearing an absolutely marvellously elegant British warm overcoat with one of these superb garments. I said, "Crikey, Nadeem, that cost a few bob. How did you afford that?" And he said, "I got it on eBay." And I said, "Well, hang on a second, you're a multi-millionaire." And he said, "That's why I'm a multi-millionaire." I mean, he obviously liked a shilling. I think everybody knew that. The reality is he was fined by the HMRC. Now, whether it's a fine or whether it's a correction or not, we don't know. The main thing, it identified him as someone who was on the wrong side of the argument there. If Rishi had had any courage, any strength at all, he would sadly, because I said I quite like the bloke and he was certainly a good and capable minister, he would have got the tin tack there and then. As it is, Rishi had to stand up last Wednesday in PMQs and defend this bloke, and the optics of that are dreadful, because whether he's actually doing due process or not, whether he's doing the right thing, is irrelevant. He stood there on Wednesday in the eyes of the nation, defending, dismiss. It looks dreadful. They can be relied, but not to be relied to be a sane, sensible, trustworthy, honest government, I'm afraid.
Well, do you think that the Labour Party are trustworthy and honest? And, I mean, in your view, Stephen, I mean, I'm probably asking you a question that you're obviously going to say they are, but, you know, do you think that the Labour Party have shrouded themselves in goodness as well? Or do you think perhaps they need to take a look at themselves too?
Look, we've had some wrong-uns in the Labour Party. Let's not pretend otherwise. But if you actually look at the Scarlet Maguire's list, just run your finger down that list of names, that list of scandals, that list of horrors, and just try to see if there's a read across for each one. Could you match that with Labour? You'd have to go back a very, very, very long time to actually come up with it. But I think the most worrying thing, is something that Lucy touched on earlier on. This actually reflects on the reputation of all politicians. People now think we're all as bad as each other. And that's the one thing I cannot forgive the Tories for. This sort of mephitic stench of sleaze that's rising from the rotting corpse of the Conservative government is actually tainting all of us. And that's the real problem. We've got a real job to do out there. And I'm looking to you, Nana, to shine the spotlight on us.
Well, it's a dirty job. Someone's got to do it. Belinda.
Can I just say... Yeah, Labour seem very keen to waft the whiff of sleaze over to the Conservative Party uniquely. Remember, for us, the Labour Party promised to respect the Brexit referendum and lied. That was a massive lie to the people of this country, because they then tried to rerun it through another referendum. They are not this squeaky clean, saint-like party. If they'd been in power for as many years, they would have had as much scandal as the next party. The truth of it is generally that respect for the job, the position of being an MP has been decreasing by the year, and politicians are not taking their job seriously enough, and they don't understand how much it angers the people that they're not careful about following the rules like we have to. But I think that's cross-party. It's not uniquely Tory.
Let's go to Scarlett. Scarlett, you've got to respond to that. Scarlett, will you respond to that one?
The thing is, it's just not true. I mean, Stephen is completely right. If you do the read across of the bullying, the sleaze, it just doesn't work. And being in power, I mean, Lucy's being in power a long time does mean that more and more things come up. But that level of sleaze, and the real problem is that Rishi Sunak did not sack him as soon as he knew that there was a problem. We all knew. I mean, everybody in Westminster, probably everybody in the country knew what the end was going to be. I mean, frankly, had Zahawi had any honour at all, he would have fallen on his sword and saved the Conservative Party and his boss, Rishi Sunak, an awful lot of trouble. Nobody could do anything as long as the Zahawi scandal was going on and as long as he hadn't been sacked.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Thank you for that. Belinda de Lucy, political commentator and former Brexit Party MEP, former Labour MP Stephen Pound, and also political commentator Reem Ibrahim. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Good to talk to you. Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online, and on digital radio. After the break, we will continue with our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, can we now trust the Tories? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel author and broadcaster Christina Hamilton, and also broadcaster and columnist Danny Kelly. Then at 5 o'clock, it's This Week's Outside. Our special celebrity guest is known as a competitive swimmer, has competed in the Olympics, Commonwealth Games and the World Championships. He's also been a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing. I'll give you one more clue. His best events include the 50-metre butterfly and the 50-metre freestyle. But can anyone guess? Who do you think it is? First, let's get your latest news headlines.
"4:32, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak has sacked Nadeem Zahawi from the government after an ethics inquiry found he'd committed a serious breach of the ministerial code. The former Tory party chairman has been facing questions over his tax affairs after admitting that he paid a penalty to HMRC for an error linked to shares in polling company YouGov. Mr Zahawi has told the Prime Minister he'll continue to support the government from the backbenches. A teenager has been charged with the murder of 15-year-old Holly Newton in Hexham. She was stabbed in the Priest Popple area of the town on Friday. A 16-year-old boy was also injured in the attack. The accused, who can't be named for legal reasons, has also been charged with attempted murder and possession of an offensive weapon. The Housing Secretary has admitted that faulty government guidance allowed the Grenfell Tower tragedy to happen in 2017, in which 72 people died. Michael Gove says the whole system of building safety wasn't policed effectively enough. He's expected to announce a 6-week deadline for developers tomorrow, forcing them to sign a contract to fix their unsafe homes or be banned from building new ones. The government is set to publish an urgent emergency care plan tomorrow to tackle pressures on the NHS. That's as the Health Department announced it wants to create virtual beds to care for tens of thousands of elderly and vulnerable people in their own homes. The Health Secretary says the initiatives will help reduce waiting times, but admits there's no quick fix. And Ukrainian tank operators have arrived in the UK to begin training. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed. It follows Britain's promise to provide 14 Challenger 2 tanks for Ukraine's fight against Russia. The government says work will get underway tomorrow. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Nana will be back in just a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's coming up to 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. These two are squabbling, Christine and Danny. These are my panellists today, honestly. It's like a married couple. Welcome back if you've just joined me. This is GB News. Look at them. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget, you can also stream us live right now on YouTube from anywhere in the world. I'm Nana Akua. Right, so it's time for our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, can you now trust the Tories Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has sacked Nadeem Zahawi from his government as Tory party chair after an inquiry found that he breached the ministerial code. Now, he has come under fire over his tax affairs after he admitted that he'd paid a penalty worth millions to HMRC, describing it as a careless mistake. And last year, Sunak promised to lead the country with integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level in his opening speech as Prime Minister. So is Rishi living up to his promise? Does this sacking signal a change in the way the government are behaving? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, can you now trust the Tories? Well, joining me is, of course, my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Christine, straight to you. Can we trust them? I mean, they're moving in the right direction, right? They realise they made a mistake. They quit an inquiry instead of do you remember the Sue Gray report, which went on and on and on?
Still going, I think.
I think it's not...
Yes and no is the answer to that. I think it was Reem on your panel who said that actually she doesn't trust the Tories to deliver conservatism. So to that extent, I certainly don't trust the Tories, no, because I think she said we've got the worst, the highest tax for 70 years, etc. So they are not delivering Conservative, which is no wonder. What do people do? You might as well vote for the real thing, because the Tories are delivering a sort of socialist agenda. But anyway, that aside, no, I think Rishi Sunak actually showed weakness over Zahawi. There's nothing that he learnt as a result of the inquiry that he didn't know before. He knew that Nadeem Zahawi had been... It's a question of how you define investigation, and Zahawi said he didn't realise he was under investigation. But Rishi Sunak, he had all the dates about when these various interviews took place. He knew all that. He must have known, and I think he was just... Possibly he didn't want to sack Zahawi, so he pushed it over, but he should have done... I think it shows weakness, not strength. So I think that was ridiculous. But no, I don't trust the Tories, I'm afraid. I do not trust them any longer to deliver what people who voted Conservative voted for, which is a Conservative programme. And I think Stephen Pound was quite wrong. I think they are.
Well, Mr. Pound, who I'm a great admirer of, on this occasion, is either deliberately myopic or looking through rose-tinted specs, or he's got some sort of short-term memory issue, because back in 2009, when Labour were in power, you remember the expenses scandal?
Yeah, I remember
I've just done a simple search about the expenses scandal by party on an American magazine called Time magazine.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's look at and these are the most outrageous, including John Prescott's toilet seat that he broke on 2 occasions. I would be too embarrassed to tell someone I'd bust my toilet seat, never mind get the taxpayer to pay for it.
I'd forgotten about
Gordon Brown, Andy Burnham, John Prescott, Margaret Beckett, Barbara Follett, Phil Willis.
Labour.
Yes, Mr. Pound, you have short-term memory issues, my friend. And there were 2 Tories, one from a Welsh MP, whatever. Now, Belinda's right. The party in power is going to have the focus on him.
Of course they are.
And Labour were in power. And so what do you have? You have 60% of the most outrageous, scandalous tax return, getting the taxpayer to pay for broken seats and repainting moats and things like that, and 6 out of 10 were Labour.
I suggest the moat repainting was probably a Tory.
That was a Tory.
Labour MPs.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
How many Labour MPs have moats?
Gordon Brown had to give back... Well, this is all in dollars. Gordon Brown had to give back $10,000 because he and his brother colluded to get some sort of cleaner to come round and do loads of properties. It's all bent, it's all corrupt. So for Labour to say the Tories are at it, I'm going to spin it back.
Yeah.
You were at it when you were in power.
To be fair, you know, look, the expenses scandal did happen, and they were forced to give that money back, and to do something about it. So
reforms have been made.
So things have been changed. So these particular instances that you refer to are actually true, and they had to deal with that. So that was not a good scandal, and a lot of people heard that. But things have changed since then, supposedly in the state of expenses. But what we're seeing here with regard to this Nadeem Zahawi business is a situation where we even hear that he was sort of quite rude to a journalist who was trying to find...
Threatening to sue him.
Threatening to sue. And so...
Needle.
This does not feel right. And I think at this point, Nadeem should absolutely go. And it doesn't look good, but like, as Belinda said, the people in power tend to be the ones who are exposed more because they're in power.
If he's been proved to be unfit to be chairman of the party and was unfit to be chancellor, although we didn't know it at the time, the question really is, should he still remain an MP? I mean, that's obviously for his constituents to decide, but it does raise that question. And who's going to replace him as party chairman? There's an interesting
Rishi Sunak shouldn't have ditched him until the findings. That's the behaviour of a dictator. One of the basic tenets of the great British democracy that most of us really value is that you are innocent until proven guilty.
I understand that, but by his own words and actions, Zahawi had actually shown to Rishi Sunak that he hadn't told him the truth, and Rishi Sunak knew he hadn't told him the truth, so why didn't he say, look, you haven't told me the truth about this, I'm afraid you've got to go?
Because
he could then have given him the option of resigning, whereas now he's been very unceremoniously
Because Nadine Zahawi may still dispute all of this. In fact, he does dispute it all.
And his allies of him apparently say that there are racist undertones to this.
No, I think it's quite... I mean, look, playing the race card on this one I don't think will work, because this is a thing, it's an actual thing that's happened, and, you know, this has got nothing to do with the colour of his skin. This is to do with a careless error, and that's why he's gone. And also because whilst this happened, he was also presiding as Chancellor, or whilst this was reported, he was presiding as Chancellor, and it sounds as though he knew about it. He knew about it. But with regard to the Gordon Brown thing, though, in his defence, because this is... I'm reading this from Time magazine, by the way. This is where I'm getting the source from. They said Number 10 said that the brothers shared a cleaner who worked in both their flats, and Andrew Brown paid her and reimbursed her for his share. But his sister-in-law, Claire Brown, has defended them, saying he definitely needed a cleaner when he was in London. It was part of his expenses. So that's the defence for it.
But he had to repay the money.
Well, anyway, but as far as I know,
that's a bit like Nadine. What's the difference between that and Nadine Zahawi?
Yeah, but I think that is quite different. And the reason I think that's quite different is because, OK, the amount seems a lot for a cleaner. Well, I don't know, though. I pay my cleaner quite a bit. So the amount seems...
Maybe he's a very messy, dirty person.
But the point with Nadine Zahawi is that it was a careless error. It's HMRC, and he was chancellor.
No, I get that. I get that. But if someone has to repay money because they've made a careless error, then surely that's very similar to Nazim. Whether it's Gordon Brown and his brother and the cleaner, you know, he had to repay that money. If he hadn't broken the legislation around expenses, he wouldn't have had to repay the money. What's the difference? They're both guilty.
Well, yes, and that's why Gordon Brown had to repay the money.
There you go, then.
So you're saying... You
know, Nana's trying to clarify something. And
what am I trying to clarify?
Well, I think what you're trying to do is caveat what I've said with that he didn't do anything wrong.
I didn't say he didn't do anything wrong. What are you talking about? I'm just saying that the two situations are different.
Well, how are they different? You've had to repay money.
Yeah, no, you've had to repay money, but the cleaner is almost believable, and apparently his sister's justified it. And, you know, to me, that's... Perhaps he shouldn't have put that in expenses, I think, is the argument with that one.
Yeah.
But the thing with Nadine Zahawi is that he was Chancellor, and also he sounded... I mean, the whole situation is totally different.
We're talking about the gravity. You're talking about the gravitas of the situation.
He tried to sue the journalist, who he could see that this journalist... Mr. Needle, I think his name is, was getting to the truth, so he tried to gag him.
If he thinks that he is innocent, then you would defend yourself by saying, if you print something defamatory, then I will sue you to protect my name. He thought that it was defamatory.
What Needle has produced was not defamatory.
We know that now, but Nadeem Zahawi is still disputing it.
No, listen, it's quite... Listen,
it's very good of you to stand up for him, but I think he knew all along.
Oh.
Do you think... Well, listen, as far as we know, that he did, obviously... There was obviously an issue that he would have known about, but when he was Chancellor, he must have known about this issue. And apparently, I mean, I've read that Boris Johnson was made aware of that there was a flag on... There's an HMRC flag, the Ethics Committee had put a flag on it. But then they tried to bring it back to Boris, but you can't do that because Rishi's in charge right now, and Nadine was in charge of as a Chancellor. But do you think now that this has
he was Chancellor for 5 minutes under Boris, wasn't he? And the minute Boris
maybe that's why Boris
appointed
him...
threw his hat in the ring, didn't he?
But Boris appointed him as Chancellor when whatever his name was went off, and literally 5 minutes later he turned round and knifed Boris in the back.
Maybe Boris knew, because Boris apparently knew about this, so perhaps he did it. Boris is very clever.
May I just make a humorous observation? And obviously humour is subjective, but with Conservative politicians, it's Boris, it's Nadeem, it's Rishi. With Labour politicians, it's Angela Rayner, it's Keir Starmer, it's... Name me a third. For some reason, we're comfortable with calling Conservative politicians by their first names, but uncomfortable with Labour. As I said, humour's subjective.
It wasn't even funny, though, was it? I mean, that objective,
you've got to have a unique name to be called just by your first name.
Right, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, your opportunity to be on the show, and tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Right, where should we go to? Should we go to Kidderminster? Should we go to Kidderminster?
Yep.
Yeah, I think we should have a chat with John. John Reed's out there.
Yes.
Yep.
Capital Carpets, Kidderminster, carpets from Kidderminster. It's John Reed. John, speak to me. What do you think about this? Do you feel more confidence in the Tory government now that we have Nadine Zahawi gone as the party chair? Does it make you feel better? Are you more comfortable with it? Reveal yourself, John Reed in Kidderminster. John, do you feel more comfortable with it?
Well, your question, can you now trust the Tories, should be, could you ever trust the Tories? I suppose if you were rich and you've got a title, you probably would. But if you're like me and you've made a living all of your working life and you've tried to earn and keep your head above water, remember the famous saying by the Tories, the NHS is safe with us. Will you try telling the nurses and the doctors that now? And not only them, is it? What about the police service? What about the prison service? We've got overflowing prisons because the judiciary is not working effectively. We're not getting people through the courts quickly enough. The Tories are keeping them in even longer than they should do. The whole of society is breaking down. And then we get a bloke like Zahawi come in and say, oh, I'm very sorry. I had to pay a bit of a fine. It's just rubbish. I would never trust them any further than I could throw them. And that sums up my impression of them in a few words.
And Nadine Zahawi is a big man. You would never be able to throw him. Thank you very much, John Reed. Good to talk to you. That's our great British voice there with his thoughts. But what are yours? As ever, I've been asking, can you trust the Tories? Lots of you have been saying what you think. Let's see. Peter says, I don't trust any of the politicians from any party to put the best interests of the country before lining their own pockets. John says, no, but I trust Labour even less. That's politics, folks. Jeff says, after throwing away an 80-seat majority, can anyone trust the Tories? He's got a good point there. 80-seat majority. Where did it all go wrong? When they got rid of Boris. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for World View. The Prime Minister has said that the hearts of the British people are with Ukraine as Germany and the USA send more tanks to the country. We're back after this.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's just coming up to 9 minutes to 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app for free. I'm Nana Akua, and it's now time for World View. Rishi Sunak has told the people of Ukraine that the hearts of the British people are with them. This comes as Germany and America have pledged to send tanks to Ukraine in aid for their war effort. Joining me to talk about that is Danny... I was about to call you Danny Kelly.
Danny Kelly.
You've changed, Danny. Danny Armstrong is a Russian expert. Danny, what's going on then? So these tanks, they're coming, but they're going to be there, what, in months, not weeks?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, Rishi Sunak has said the British hearts are with the Ukrainian people. He also said that Britain and, of course, the UK, rather, will stand with Ukraine and aid them for as long as it takes. But there's certainly the argument on the Russian side that as long as the West continues to aid Ukraine and continues to, what some would call, funnel money into this proxy war in Ukraine between US and NATO and Russia, that's how long the war will go on. Now, tanks have been sanctioned and signed off to be delivered by Germany and the UK and the US. Of course, there was lots of political wrangling over that.
Yep.
There was the Ramstein meeting that failed to reach a conclusion on whether Germany should send over tanks. We finally have those tanks going over, but it could take until March. It could take weeks and months. And then, of course, you have to factor in the training of the troops to work out this kind of weaponry. But if we see how this has been accepted by Ukraine and by President Volodymyr Zelensky, he has said that it's not enough, basically. And he's also asked for F-15 fighter jets. Now, the F-15 fighter jets are basically US-made fighter jets. They're used by many NATO countries. They were deployed to Poland as early as February 2022, just before the invasion as a deterrent, and have been deployed as recently as December 2022, 2022, sorry, to carry out some deterrence missions during the war. Now, what this means is that if these F-15 fighter jets are given to Ukraine, that would completely legitimize Vladimir Putin's pretext for war, that if Russia hadn't launched this invasion, there would be an attack from the other side. He didn't want NATO bases.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, but it's not his country. I mean, like, you know, his country is Russia. If he's posing a threat to other countries on the borders, then what does he expect them to do? They're not just going to sit there and wait for it. He's already invaded places like Finland. I mean, Russia has invaded places like Finland, places on the borders.
Well,
so
we can turn it on its head and say, from the Russian side, of course, now they're finding this denazification. They're finding Nazis in Ukraine against German tanks, which is what they did in World War II. And that's how it's been kind of reported in Russian state media. That's what the message from the Kremlin coming down to the people. Now, what we saw when the Ukraine war and the Ukraine conflict was the Ukraine crisis, when it was leading up to the invasion, the main thing, the main red line for Russia is that they didn't want Ukraine to join NATO, because then that would mean that there would be air bases and bases where you could station missiles to fire on Russia.
But that's tough.
Now,
they were
that is the biggest red line. Now,
but they were party to the Budapest memorandum, which said that they would support Ukraine in terms of efforts of war, just in case, because they got them to disarm their nuclear armament, and they did that, and now they are the aggressor. So
but now we have
all bets are off. They've broken the rules.
Well, yeah, but now we have this rhetoric of politicians that we need to send a message to Vladimir Putin. We need to get tough with Vladimir Putin. That has never given a bilaterally beneficial outcome. That has never given anything that would be seen as a resolution to this conflict. If we take it back to when it was the Ukraine crisis, or what it was called as the Ukraine crisis before the invasion, there were 5 countries that shared a border with Russia where the US and NATO could theoretically put these fighter jets and put this weaponry within firing distance of Moscow. They didn't want it to become 7 with Georgia and Ukraine, and that's basically where we're at now. But if politicians wanted to be tough, they would have accepted Ukraine into NATO, but they haven't done that because it's a huge red line for Russia, and they don't want to basically poke the bear.
Well, perhaps they shouldn't invade sovereign countries. That will be that, really. Danny Armstrong, thank you very much for joining me. Right, let's travel over to America now, and let's have a chat with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge. Paul, thank you so much for joining me. Now, there's that awful, horrendous story about the killing of Tyree Nichols. What can you tell us? And, you know, I mean, honestly, I can't even listen to the audio of that. It's horrendous.
It is. It's harrowing, isn't it? Forgive my croaky voice, by the way. I'm fighting flu. Your reaction, I think, is the same worldwide. It's been extraordinary. That video was actually held. It's reported that it was held back for release until late Friday. so that by Memphis police to make sure that schools were out and most people were away from their places of work to try and minimize the reaction. Not surprisingly, it sparked nationwide protests in the US. We're looking at something like 20 protests taking place as we speak from Los Angeles, Sacramento, Boston, Atlanta, Detroit, New York. Some of these are turning violent. Columbus, Ohio, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. There's been a widespread outpouring of emotion about this video and the death on the 10th of January of Tyree Nichols, as you say, 29 years old. So I think the reaction has been universal. And I mean, really all we can speak to at the moment is the reaction in the US, and it has been universally condemned. Trump came out and said this just should not have happened. And so Biden has spoken to the mother and the stepfather of Tyree Nichols on Friday. But as I said, I think that this has been handled actually as delicately and sensitively as possible to try and mitigate and avoid as much of the potential violence as possible.
And I mean, it was black on black as well. So it's black officers who did this, which is, you know, when I saw the George Floyd incident, of course, the 4 officers, only 2 were actually white. One was of Asian descent and another one was black. And I, in my mind, saw it as police violence, actually. And it seems to be something that is prevalent in the States. I'm wondering how fast the reaction would have been if they'd been white officers. Did they feel that the reaction would have been the same if it had been white officers? Very briefly, then we can move on to Trump.
No, I think you raise a great point. I mean, the only thing, gosh, there is no saving grace in this entire story, but part of, I think, what is making this quite not as explosive as the George Floyd incident is the fact that all 5 officers are black.
Well, let's move on to Trump then, because, I mean, that's a terrible story, this one. And, you know, I can't even listen to or watch that video, and I won't be watching it. But let's talk Trump now, because he's apparently making a comeback. Is he, I mean, what's going on to the RNC? What's that about?
Yeah, well, obviously he announced in November that he was making an official bid to be president again in 2024. And Saturday, he began his official campaigning, and this was in New Hampshire and South Carolina, I beg your pardon. So he's begun the actual official campaigning. Some saying it was very low key. I mean, he can command huge crowds when he wants to, but this was a much more sedate, some would say political version of Trump, much more presidential, shall we say. Wasn't quite as rousing as we are used to seeing from President Trump.
Well, listen, Paul, we're running out of time.
He's saying he's angry.
I'm going to have to take us.
He says he's angrier than ever. That's the important thing. That's the big takeaway. He's angrier than ever.
Lovely to talk to you again. That's Paul Dudred, host of the Politics People podcast. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. Good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, stay tuned, because for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. On the way, I'll be joined by a famous Olympic swimmer. He'll be talking to us about his highs, his lows, and what comes next as he's on the outside of all that. Do you know who he is? Message me, let me know. Coming up as well, our Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite on education? First, though, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak has sacked Nadeem Zahawi after an ethics inquiry found that he'd committed a serious breach of the ministerial code. The former Tory party chairman has been facing questions over his tax affairs after admitting that he'd paid a penalty to HMRC for an error linked to shares in polling company YouGov. In a letter, Mr Zahawi told the Prime Minister that he'll continue to support the government from the backbenches. MP Jacob Rees-Mogg says he has sympathy for him.
The report seems to show that he made some technical errors with his declarations under the Ministerial Code, and the Prime Minister has decided that they were serious enough to fire him. So I feel sorry for Nadeem Zahawi, but I think that after it dominating the headlines for a week, the rule of politics is that if you do that, it's very hard to remain in office.
Well, Labour Party Chair Annalise Dodds has written to the Prime Minister saying he has a lot of questions to answer.
What did he know and when about that enormous settlement that Nadeem Zahawi was negotiating with HMRC and the huge penalty that he had to pay? Why did Rishi Sunak say in Parliament that all questions had been answered about this affair? And why on earth is the Prime Minister holding up this rogues gallery of Conservative ministers with others who obviously have broken security rules, who are subject to allegations of very serious bullying, and yet the Prime Minister seems too weak to act against them?
Some breaking news now, and no newly convicted transgender person with a history of violence against women will be placed in female prisons in Scotland. The announcement by Scotland's Justice Secretary aims to ensure the safety of female prisoners, while the Scottish Prison Service reviews the management of trans prisoners. The decision comes ahead of an urgent review into lessons learned by the case of convicted double rapist Isla Bryson, who was originally sent to a women's prison. We'll have more on that story. A 16-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of a teenage girl in Hexham. 15-year-old Holly Newton was stabbed in the Priestpopple area of the town on Friday and died in hospital. A 16-year-old boy was also injured. The accused, who can't be named for legal reasons, has also been charged with attempted murder and possession of an offensive weapon. The Housing Secretary has admitted that faulty government guidance allowed the Grenfell Tower tragedy to happen. Michael Gove says the whole system of building safety wasn't policed effectively enough. He's expected to announce a 6-week deadline for developers tomorrow, forcing them to sign a contract to fix their unsafe homes or be banned from building new ones. The fire at the residential tower block in West London killed 72 people in 2017. Boris Johnson was reportedly told to stop asking Richard Sharp for advice about his personal financial matters just 2 weeks before he was announced as the new chairman of the BBC. According to the Sunday Times, Mr Johnson, who was PM at the time, was warned to stop discussions in December 2020. Mr Sharp, a former banker, is facing calls to resign after it emerged that he introduced the former PM to a guarantor for a loan. The government will publish an urgent emergency care plan tomorrow to try to tackle pressures on the NHS. It comes as the Health Department announced plans to build virtual beds, caring for tens of thousands of elderly and vulnerable people in their own homes. The Health Secretary admitted that there's no quick fix, but said shifting care away from hospitals will reduce waiting times. However, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has accused the government of sticking plaster politics.
It seems we've gone from 40 new hospitals to hospitals at home. I think a lot of people will say, well, how will I be able to be treated in my own home if the government's half the number of district nurses who are essential to provide support in the community? I think this is a government that's run out of steam, run out of ideas, and isn't able to deal with the fundamental problems of the NHS, and so they're resorting to sticking plasters.
Dame Esther Ranson has revealed that she's been diagnosed with lung cancer, but says she's remaining optimistic. The 82-year-old admitted it's been difficult keeping her diagnosis a secret and says she wanted to share the news in her own words. Last year, the broadcaster received a Lifetime Achievement Award for her charity work, and she was made a DBE in 2015 for her services to children and older people through Childline and the Silver Line. The head of the Welsh Rugby Union has resigned amid allegations of a toxic culture within the governing body. Steve Phillips' decision comes after the WRU announced an external task force will investigate claims of misogyny, sexism, racism and homophobia in the institution. Former Wales winger Nigel Walker has become acting CEO. He's warning of an existential crisis for Welsh rugby ahead of the Six Nations. And Novak Djokovic has won his 10th Australian Open tennis title. Emotions ran high after the Serbian beat Greece's Stefanos Tsitsipas in straight sets, 6-3, 7-6, 7-6. The 35-year-old now holds 22 Grand Slam titles, equalling Rafa Nadal's record, and he's reclaimed his position as world number one. Djokovic returned to the tournament after being denied entry last year for failing to follow Australian COVID rules. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 8 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is at GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing it. At times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Still to come each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career, and take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today, I'm joined by a former Olympic swimmer. Now, our celebrity guest is known as a competitive swimmer and has competed in the Olympics. Now, he's also been a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing. His best events include the 50-metre butterfly and the 50-metre freestyle. And he's also involved in charity work. So has anybody got it? Who is he? Come on. You'll find out in just a moment. And then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite on education? Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has promised to scrap the charitable status of independent schools despite receiving a bursary during his sixth form years after his grammar school turned private. So is this hypocritical? Email me gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Oh. That's better. Right. So now it is time for Outside, and this is my special guest. Now, did you get it? He is best known. He's a competitive swimmer. He's represented the country in the Olympics, the World Championships and also the Commonwealth Games. He became the fastest swimmer in the country by the age of 15. He's now considered to be one of the most successful swimmers in Britain. The now 52-year-old, so quite considerably older than me, has won 6 World Championship titles, 2 Commonwealth titles and 11 European titles during his career. And his best events include the 50 metres butterfly, 50 metres freestyle, and following his swimming career, our celebrity guest has made several appearances on the various programmes. One of those is Strictly, The Weakest Link, and Through the Keyhole. Not only has he remained in the spotlight, he's also thrown himself into charity work. So who is he? He is former Olympic swimmer Mark Foster. Mark, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I was guessing.
Did you guess? You want to know who it was? It's me!
Yeah, I want to apologise to your researcher, first of all, because she asked me to send in some pictures of when I was younger.
Oh, really?
So you could have had a little bit more of a,
Yeah, I bet you were quite sweet when you were little.
What, you said I'm not now?
Were you tall? Yeah, when...
I was a lot shorter then, but then I'm sat down now anyway. So
but were you tall when you were young?
Yeah, I was kind of 6'1" when I was 13.
Really? How tall are you now?
6'6".
Now, that must help with swimming.
It does. I mean, in general terms, I'll make it basic. The most important things for swimming are big paddles, big flippers, big feet, big hands. So
I've got massive hands. I bet my hands are bigger than yours. Let's have a quick look. No, they're not. Almost. They're big, though. Big for a girl. Big for a girl. Yeah, my dad said to me, no, you're deformed, your hands, they're bigger than mine. That's what he said, seriously. So what got you into swimming?
I learned like most kids, really. It's a sort of life skill. One of the big reasons why I got pushed in the pool, so to speak, was my dad at 11. For him, he got thrown in the lake, petrified of water and nearly drowned. He never learnt to swim, but he was determined myself and my sisters would learn for safety reasons. So he used to take us along to the pool and throw us around. And then I went for the important bit, which was swimming lessons, and probably what a lot of people don't know, or they probably wouldn't know, that my swimming teacher was a lady called Mrs. Hardcastle, who was the mother of a girl called Sarah Hardcastle, who went to the 1984 Olympics and won a silver and a bronze medal in the 400 and 800 freestyle. That was my teacher. So she had a good eye. So basically, when I got in the water and I showed promise, she pushed me into the club and it sort of happened from there.
And so you, at age 15, you were a fabulous swimmer. I mean, talk to me about fastest swimmer in the UK.
Yeah, I was the fastest 11-year-old in the world. So I did the national championships and I compared myself to everybody else in the world. Back of a magazine, there were all these results. So I kind of realised I was the fastest 11-year-old in the world. And then at 15, became the fastest swimmer in the UK. Senior, swimmer, man, whatever. I had a scholarship to Millfield School, so off I went down there. But my big thing is, I surrounded myself with people better than me. So every day I pushed myself and learnt from other people, and I kind of created good habits by having better people around me.
Well, that's...
There's more luck than judgment, to be fair.
Well, that's very important as well. I mean, if you surround yourself with 10 tramps, you'll be the 11th one. Surround yourself with 10 billionaires, you'll be the 11th one, of course.
That didn't happen, no.
That's how it goes.
Just a swimmer.
But swimming has been, obviously, a big thing in your life. What is the biggest thing that you feel that you've done in swimming? The proudest moment that you had?
I suppose a couple of things. I got to carry the flag round at the 2008 Olympic Games opening ceremony. So flag bearer for Team GB. My 5th Olympics. I'm going to be my last Olympics. So walking into the Olympic Stadium, holding the flag and leading out Team GB in front of 85,000 people was awesome. And in the pool, I suppose, breaking the world record for the 50 freestyle,
wow,
which meant that I was the fastest, for that moment, the fastest human being to travel through water.
God,
and I broke it 8 times, but other people broke it and it's now moved on. But
you have to be so focused. You have to be so focused, don't you? You must have given up quite a lot to do all of this.
Sacrifices, I don't think I noticed any sacrifices simply because all the people I hanged around with, my mates, did the same thing. So I think I would have probably noticed if I'd have making a sacrifice had my mates been going out the weekend, and I'd have been like, oh, great, I'm getting up for another training session. But weekends were going to swimming galas, swimming competitions, training camps. And don't get me wrong, I think when I didn't get paid a penny until I was 22 years of age.
Right.
So until that point, it was just my love and my passion. And then I thought, oh, this is a job. But any sports person that tells you that it's not the best job in the world, that your love and your passion becomes your job, albeit that I knew I was going to retire early at 38. But for that moment, I mean, it was a dream, really.
What do you think now? Because I'm going to ask you, because there's always this big trans argument. And, you know, of course, we had the situation with Leah Thomas, who was the fastest female swimmer, or, you know, in the female category. What do you think as you're looking at that? Because obviously when you were swimming, this wasn't a thing.
No, I only know...
Or was it?
I don't think it was.
Yeah.
We didn't hear anything. But I think at the same time, looking at it from my perspective now, looking at it from a level playing field, so to speak, if you took a 20-year-old me that was in his peak of his powers, the world record holder, so to speak, and I transitioned, if that had been what I wanted to do, and then I came up against female swimmers, I generally would have wiped the floor with them. And I think that would have been slightly unfair. But then I was a male world record holder. I think it's slightly unfair that you try and put those two on a level playing field. And I think when women for years have fought for equal rights in whatever arena it is, all of a sudden you're making it an unlevel playing field. And I think elite sport is unfair and possibly, potentially dangerous when you look at the likes of, I don't know, MMA, boxing, fighting, or rugby, for example. You've got these, you know, you're born bigger genes, bigger hands, arms, a lot. So I think it would be unfair.
Yeah, it shouldn't, in my view, it shouldn't be that way. But anyway, other things you've done, though, because I actually met you many years ago, though you didn't remember me.
It's because you're in your dance gear.
That's right. Well, I had a big afro as well. But I used to do Fit Steps, which was like a dance thing. It was like a dance workout. You got involved in that. How did you move from what you're doing to that? Was that the first thing you moved to? Or
it was out of an experience, became an opportunity. So I did Strictly Come Dancing in 2008. I made it halfway. I loved it. I loved the show and I didn't realise that you could have so much fun dancing, but also get fit by dancing, because my whole sports world was obviously in the pool. And I'm realising how much fun it was. I had a big thing about getting people fit and healthy, and in my head it was going to be through exercise that I used to do in the gym. But then doing Strictly and realising that some people don't like swimming, biking, running, gymming, but they love dance. And from kids to parents to grandparents, it kind of splits all ages. So I got together with Ian Waite and Natalie Lowe, two of the pro dancers from Strictly. And I said, look, you know dance, I know fitness. I'll do the health, well-being side of things. You do the dance side of things. We created Fit Steps, which is using the 14 Latin and ballroom dances from Strictly, and we put it into a dance class. So people can follow a teacher and get fit and healthy, and not just the fit and health side, the community. So that's sort of social aspect as well.
I know, because I was a Fit Steps instructor.
You were. You said you were an A instructor as well, what did you call it?
Master trainer.
Master trainer.
Yeah, I used to train power hoop, everything. I did all of it. I used to teach as well and do training courses and stuff.
I think you should do that here at the weekend.
You think, yeah. No, this lot won't do it. This lot won't do it.
For your panellists.
Here at GBNews. I'll get Danny onto it, my panellist. I'll try and get him onto it. You won't get the hoop round him. Now, you're also a bit of a philanthropist. You're a patron of anaphylaxis campaign. Talk to me about why you decided to get involved with that.
it's quite a painful story, but when I trained in Bath, I trained at Bath University, and I obviously part of the swimming programme, and the athletics programme had Colin Jackson. And there was obviously the athletes and the swimmers, and I used to hang out with the athletes a lot. And there was one athlete in particular that used to train with Colin Jackson. He was going to be the next up-and-coming Colin Jackson, and his name was Ross Bailey. Now, Ross had a nut allergy, which he knew about and people knew about, I knew about. And Colin was off training one day at a competition, and I was with Ross, and we'd been training in the morning, done our gym session. We went to get a sandwich at lunchtime, and he didn't want to be a hassle to the guy that owns a sandwich shop. So I said, I'll have coronation chicken. Ross said, I'll have one of them. I didn't know what was in it. He didn't know what was in it. Anyway, cut a long story short, it had nuts in the sauce, and he had a reaction to it, and basically 3 days later he died.
Oh, no.
And for seeing somebody that was so, a very, very good friend, but someone that was so fit and healthy, and that something that you don't even see could affect somebody like that, I sort of put my weight. I sort of thought I'd get involved with trying to help out people's awareness around anaphylactic shock. And that's not just from nuts, that can be from bee stings and everything else. It's frightening. It was frightening what he did.
Yeah, it must have been very frightening for you. Sorry to hear that. This sounds like a great guy.
It was awesome. It was awesome. That was a lovely. It wouldn't hurt anybody whatsoever. So yeah, it was sad. Very sad.
And also, you're also a spokesperson for LGBTQ+ community as well. Talk to us about that.
I suppose it comes from, as a kid growing up late 70s, early 80s, realising that I was different, but hearing, I kind of knew I was gay, but a period and a time when, from the playground to the news, papers, even the changing room, where it was all, being gay is not right, it's not normal. And I kind of went, well, is that me? I wasn't quite sure of my sexuality, but I felt that I was attracted to men. But I kind of hid it away, and I thought, well, don't show yourself, because people are they're going to judge you. And I was afraid of people's reaction. And then when I became a professional swimmer, I was worried about what sponsors might think. So I kind of lived two separate lives. I had Mark the swimmer, and I had Mark the home life. So for a long period of time, throughout my whole swimming career, because I never felt, not safe as in I was afraid of being physically beaten up, but just afraid of showing my true self, really. So it wasn't until about 5 years ago, at 47, that I kind of, I'm going to say officially came out and did some stuff in the papers. Let's face it, it's swimming, it's not football. There's not that much interest. And I realised I wasn't a tortured soul, but I also realised in parts of the UK still, people are beaten up on a daily basis and abused. And around the world, there's still the death penalty. And it's frightening and shocking. I thought, well, I've got a platform where I can stand up, and maybe, hopefully, someone somewhere will get a little bit of strength from that.
Good on you, Mark. Good on you. So what are you doing now? What's your big thing? What's your next big thing?
I've got Fit Steps. I've got a swim academy. I do a lot of speaking. So not this kind of speaking, but in front of, from kids at school to universities to government sector to private businesses. So whether it's motivational speaking or coming out, bringing your best self to work, dealing with mental health, well-being, I do a lot of speaking.
Well, listen, Mark, it's been good listening.
It's been lovely seeing you again.
Thank you
back
so
on the dance floor.
You didn't even remember me, Mark. Listen, you better follow me back on Twitter.
I will do, I promise.
24 hours, otherwise you're dead to me.
OK.
Thank you. That's Mark Foster. He's a fabulous, amazing swimmer. Of course, an Olympic swimmer. Well, stay with me. Coming up, it is the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite on education? Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has promised to scrap the charitable status of independent schools, despite receiving a bursary during his sixth form years after his grammar school turned private. Do you think he's being a hypocrite? Join me for the debate after this.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 23 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite on education? Now, the Labour leader passed the 11+ exam and attended Reigate Grammar School in 1974, but following the abolition of the direct grant, it became an independent fee-paying school 2 years later. Now, this means Sir Keir Starmer benefited from a private school's charity bursary to help fund his studies at a fee-paying sixth form school. So the Labour leader is now vowing to end the charitable status of private schools, and that means that parents of private school students could face paying a 20% VAT charge on fees, which could push them up to around 90,000 private school children in state schools, and that would be removing the charitable status, which could apparently raise 1.7 billion, with 104 million in business rates, allowing further money to fund the state education sector, and that is set to be heavily disrupted across the next month, according to the National Education Union. So the teachers, of course, going on strike on Wednesday, I know, because my son and daughter will be at home. But actually, I'm quite looking forward to it. We've still got the Christmas tree up. They can take it down, the two of them. I know one's only 5, though. He's not going to be much help. But critics have dubbed Starmer's Labour Party hypocrites, as the likes of him, Jeremy Corbyn, Tony Blair, Shami Chakrabarti, Emily Thornberry and Diane Abbott all attended or sent their kids to private schools. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite on education? Well, I'm joined by former MEP and businessman Ben Habib and reality TV star and commentator Narinder Kaur. Was that just the two of them? Just you two? Oh, somebody's deserted us. I'm going to start with you, Ben Habib. Ben, so Keir Starmer, he has had the benefit of a private education. He even went to a grammar school as well and had a bursary. What do you think?
Well, I mean, he's obviously a hypocrite just by that measure. But, you know, let's just look at what he's advocating. He's advocating what I think is the lowest form of politics, the politics of envy, stripping charitable status from schools that actually are the pride. One thing this country does really well is the public school system. And it's an easy target for him, isn't it? Because he thinks he's going to score easy political points attacking what is regarded as the private school system. But they're not private. They do charitable works. That's why they have charitable status. Now, I was on the governing body for a while of Rugby School, which is my alma mater as well. Rugby has about 1/3 of its students who get bursaries. So these are not children who are getting scholarships because they're particularly clever. It's basically normal children, but from financially disadvantaged backgrounds, who get a leg up. Now, just get your head around that. 1/3 of their intake comes from financially disadvantaged students. If you remove the charitable status from public schools, you take away, first of all, the incentive for them to do any good in their communities, and you increase the burden on those who are paying for it. And what's going to happen? You're going to damage this fantastic institution that we have in the United Kingdom, and there will be no benefit for the state schools. And that's the point. What Keir Starmer lacks is any vision for how to increase the quality of education in the state sector. That's what he needs to focus on. And he needs to stop attacking something that actually works incredibly well and fulfills a fantastic charitable purpose.
Well, Linda, what would you say to that? Because as Ben pointed out, a third of the pupils that went to this particular school were actually, were being funded by the school itself. So those kids would go back to... Hang on, let me finish. Those kids would go back to the state sector. So how do you think... What do you think? Do you think he's a hypocrite?
Well, firstly, I don't think it's hypocritical. I think there's nothing hypocritical about Keir Starmer wanting equal education for all. State school education has been underfunded for nearly 13 years now, and teachers are striking next week because that's the dire state the school is in. Working class disadvantaged because of a two-tier education system. Keir Starmer has realised he's benefited from a system that's fundamentally wrong. Why are private schools not taxed? They're not charitable. They pick and choose. And actually, I would fact check what Ben is saying because
no, they are.
4% only offer for bursaries. 4%. That's not enough. That's not a third. I would fact check that. And actually, they're not taxed. Why are they not taxed?
Can I ask you, Narinda?
They're making profit.
Narinda, did you go to a private school?
I didn't go private school, but actually, I will confess, I sent my children to private school, but I regret that bitterly. I regret it bitterly.
So did your child finish private school then? So they went through the private school system?
No, we took them out and put them in a state school because I felt it was just so fundamentally wrong. And the children there that were on a bursary, there was 1 or 2 children in the whole year. That is not a third. That's not right. And they should not be benefited in the expense of the public purse.
Let Ben respond.
Narinda, they would have their charitable status stripped of them if they weren't providing a genuine charitable endeavour, a charitable service. So it just can't be right that the school that you cited is giving such small service, as it were, to the charitable sector. It just can't be right. And the other thing, by the way, I agree with you, there's a two-tier system. You have the private schools that are fantastic and you have the state schools that are rubbish. But you don't bring up the state schools by damaging the private schools. What the Labour Party has to do and what politicians generally have to do is stop focusing on the politics of envy and start focusing on the improvement across the board for everyone to be educated.
Well, what do you say to that? I mean, it feels like a race to the bottom.
They're not. It's not fair at all. They've been severely underfunded, public schools have. They need more money. Why are private schools not taxed? Tax them, put some more money so that we have... The most important thing as a taxpayer is to have equal education for our children, whether you are poor or whether you are rich. And actually, the emphasis should be on greater education. It needs to be a level playing field. And then it is not a level playing field at all because people are going to sending their children to private school. And actually, the schools are making profit.
No, they're not. I was going to just say that.
Hold on, let Ben respond. You said they're making profit.
You cannot hold charitable status and make a profit. You have to be not-for-profit. And this idea...
Let him finish. Narinda, let him finish.
You don't improve the state sector by damaging the private sector. It's just a fundamentally flawed politics of envy, redistribution of wealth, socialist concept. It just doesn't work. What Keir Starmer should do is focus on how he's going to improve standards in the state school and let the private sector get on with what it's doing because it's doing it incredibly well and with a charitable endeavour that helps the country.
Well, what would you say to that?
I disagree with that so much. It's not anybody trying. They pick and choose which children could come in by taking tests. How is that charitable, Ben?
Okay, can I just say? Okay, well, look. I went to a private school. I started off actually at a comprehensive school, then I went to a private school, and my parents had to pay for my education. But there were plenty of children there who were being supported and paid for, and scholarship kids. But not only that, I'll give you an example of what some of these private schools do. This particular school, every week, has a minibus that picks up loads of the elderly and takes them to the school and feeds them and does all this. So they do charitable things as well. And I think that's something that Keir Starmer is missing with his ideas.
I don't think he's missing that at all. He's actually saying it's fundamentally wrong. He's looked at the system that he was in through a bursary, may I add, so he's not been a hypocrite at all.
Narinda, what's his vision?
He's
what's
fundamentally
his vision for the state sector?
Unjust.
Apart from removing charitable status and forcing these charitable entities now to cease their charitable activities. What's his vision for the state sector? How's he going to improve the state sector? He's going to raise maybe another 1% of funding by adding VAT to the bills of private schools. How is that extra 1% of funding going to help him improve the state sector? What's his vision for the state sector?
Well, we need more public funding into schools. If there's anything that we need more public funding, I'd say take a little bit from the NHS. We need it in our schools because children deserve an equal education. Yes,
from the NHS.
The money that goes there.
The NHS that's got just about 7 million people on the waiting list and is currently working out how they're going to send an ambulance to you within a day. Are you serious?
Well, they get so much money, and I think schools need it more. Our children need an equal education. We need more funding into our state schools because they're in a dire state. Children are important.
That's true. That's true. They are in a dire state as we speak. Listen, thank you so much, Narinder Kaur. Really good to talk to you, reality TV star. And also Ben Habib, he's the former MEP and a businessman. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's see what you've been saying. Daryl says he's a hypocrite on everything. Joshua says, to be honest, I think most politicians are hypocrites. Andrew says the Tories have become the party of casual corruption. They've destroyed our country while lining their pockets. They are the hypocrites. Well, resounding hypocrites all over. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue with our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite on education? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5:32. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak has sacked Nadeem Zahawi from the government after an ethics inquiry found that he'd committed a serious breach of the ministerial code. The former Tory party chairman has been facing questions over his tax affairs after admitting that he paid a penalty to HMRC for an error linked to shares in polling company YouGov. Mr Zahawi has told the Prime Minister he'll continue to support the government from the backbenches. No newly convicted transgender person with a history of violence against women will be placed in female prisons in Scotland. The temporary measure aims to ensure the safety of inmates while the management of trans prisoners is examined. The decision comes ahead of an urgent review into lessons learned by the case of convicted double rapist Isla Bryson, who was originally sent to a women's prison. A teenager has been charged with the murder of 15-year-old Holly Newton in Hexham. She was stabbed in the Priest Popple area of the town on Friday. A 16-year-old boy was also injured. The accused, who can't be named for legal reasons, has also been charged with attempted murder and possession of an offensive weapon. The government is set to publish an urgent emergency care plan tomorrow to tackle pressures on the NHS. That's as the Health Department announced that it wants to create virtual beds to care for tens of thousands of elderly and vulnerable people in their own homes. The Health Secretary says the initiatives will help reduce waiting times, but admitted that there's no quick fix. And Ukrainian tank operators have arrived here in the UK to begin training. The Ministry of Defence confirming that earlier. It follows Britain's promise to provide 14 Challenger 2 tanks for Ukraine's fight against Russia. The government says work will get underway tomorrow. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is the People's Channel, GB News. Nana will be back in just a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. If you just joined us, where have you been? It's all right, I'll let you off. You've still got 23 minutes left. I'm Nana Akua and it is time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite on education? Now, it's been revealed Sir Keir Starmer has benefited from a private school's charity bursary to help fund his studies whilst he attended a fee-paying sixth form back in the 1970s. Now, this is despite the Labour leader vowing to end the charitable status of private schools, which means that parents could face paying a 20% VAT charge on fees, which could potentially push around 90,000 private school children into state schools, which I don't think he's worked out the cost of. So removing the status could raise around about 1.7 billion with 104 million in business rates. But I'm wondering how much it would cost to put 90,000 children back into the state system. And that would allow further money to fund the state education sector, which it would be needed because the kids are just new. 90,000 children have probably gone there. Basically, next month, as you know, well, this month as well, we've got some strikes because the teachers within that sector are not happy. Critics have dubbed Starmer's Labour Party as hypocrites because people like Jeremy Corbyn, Tony Blair, Shami Chakrabarti, Emily Thornberry and Diane Abbott all sent their kids to private school. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Sir Keir Starmer a hypocrite on education? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Danny, I'm going to start with you.
Is he a hypocrite?
Sorry. Did you go to private school?
Yeah, I did go to private school, yeah. I left with absolutely nothing.
I was about to say no, an answer for you, but you left with nothing.
Absolutely nothing. And it was thousands of pounds not well spent.
I bet what was your dad angry about that?
Yeah, I think they were very disappointed with me. And the crazy thing is that I haven't used academia once in order to be a success away from school.
But what went
I've done very well. I was too much of a joker. I took nothing seriously. I was a scallywag. You've heard the term scallywag, and normally it's a term of endearment. But I probably ruined loads of other kids' education. I was just a horrible little...
You think scallywag is a term of endearment?
It can be a term of endearment. But again, that's subjective. Is Keir Starmer a hypocrite?
Is he?
No, that's ludicrous. He was 16 when he went. Now, Keir Starmer, at 16, had no control about where his parents were going to take him or send him to secondary education. How can he be hypocritical? This is just unfair. Now, just hold that thought for a second. Now, he has developed, he's now 60, I think, and he's a parent. Now, every parent wants the very best. Now, I'm going to defend Narinda. We don't know why she decided to send her kids to private school. She may live in the dog-rough part of Leicester, where all the local comps are violent and, kids fighting and all of that. And she may... What?
I think she does, yes.
OK, so she lives in the Leicester ghetto.
I don't know.
And she wants the best for her children.
Yeah.
And I think that is admirable. That doesn't mean that she can't be part of a bigger conversation about how money is spent on private education, because every parent wants the very best for their children.
OK.
Well, you're quite right. Nobody can blame themselves for where they were sent to school. I mean, I was sent to a private school, I was expelled, and I then went to a grammar school. So I've had a wide education. But so therefore, it's not hypocritical of Keir Starmer, but to me, they're approaching this whole debate in the wrong way. The ones who are hypocritical are the ones who send their children. Apparently, Jeremy Corbyn's second wife, it was the major cause of divorce because she wanted to send their son to a private school and he wouldn't have it. But she said, I am not sacrificing my son's future on the altar of your political principles, apparently. So good for her, good for him, as it were. No, good for her. Anyway, what we should be having is we should be trying to level up, not level down. The private schools are generally acknowledged to have better results, better everything. So why aren't we trying to bring the rest up, not bring it all down? What we need are education vouchers. If every parent was given a voucher to the tune of a year's worth of education, and they then decide where to take it. Where do they take that voucher? Do they take that to the state system, or do they take it to a private system?
Sorry, a voucher with a monetary value?
Yes, with education, yes.
Well, so how would that work?
Well, because it would work. You get your money, and you choose where you'd spend it on food, for example.
This is with every parent, with
every parent. Because at the moment, if you choose to have private education, you have to pay twice.
You're paying tax twice.
You're paying tax twice, and you're paying twice for it, just like health education. You're paying twice. Now, if people are prepared to do that and able to do that, they are the lucky ones.
Who's going to pay for it all? There's millions of kids and parents are going to be given a cheque.
It's come from tax. It'll be a tax. Listen,
the government are paying for it anyway. This just gives...
Well, we're paying for it.
Normal, ordinary parents who don't have enough income, it gives them some bargaining power to say, right, if I'm not happy with the education at this school, I will go to another school. It puts the control in the hands of the parents, where it should be. At the moment, parents are impotent. They just have to go to the local school, and if that's a sink school, tough.
Well, listen, where I stand, I think he's an absolute hypocrite. I cannot even believe that your argument is so weak that because he went there, that's just ridiculous. Listen, if you have personally benefited from something, whether you paid for it or somebody else paid for it, that is the point. You personally benefited from it.
And then you pull the ladder up
pulling the ladder up and saying, oh, well, it's not my fault, my parents sent me there. You're a hypocrite. He's an absolute hypocrite. No. How dare he?
He's not
let me finish. How dare he do that? I went to private school. I did both. I went to comprehensive school. I was at the top of that. My grades slid within a year. I then went to a private school because my father, we moved abroad and the bank were paying for it. So my dad sent me to a lovely, expensive school run by nuns. And I meet people who went to the same comprehensive school that I went to. And I'm like a genius next to them in terms of my qualifications and what I've achieved next to them, yet it had nothing to do with how brainy they were because we were on an equal level. So listen, so my point is this. Keir Starmer has benefited. He's in politics now. He's got a very, very good job and he's benefited from the education that he had. How dare he make it difficult for other parents to benefit in the way he has?
I do agree with you. I'm just saying, supporting what Danny said, that it is not as hypocritical as the Labour politicians who send their own children to these schools, who also then deny it to other people. I think that is more hypocritical.
It's all layers here, hypocrisy. It's all layers. I don't know what...
It's degrees.
It's only hypocritical, in my view, if someone says that there is no difference in education between a state school and a private school.
But there is.
Of course.
Yeah, but he already knows that, though.
So it's not hypocrisy.
Well, it is hypocrisy because he knows that and he's still doing it.
He's trying to deny it to other people.
And the worst bit is he was actually given some sort of bursary to help him so that that even proves how the charitable status of these private schools help people like him. It's double-edged hypocrisy.
And he hasn't thought it through either.
At all.
It's going to push.
He was 16. It was his parents' decision.
Yeah, but he wants to deny other people what he benefited from. Yes, but
how can he be hypocritical if it wasn't his choice?
Because he's benefited
No, hypocrisy.
He wants to deny to other children.
It's the wrong word. Hypocrisy is the wrong word.
I'm afraid it's the right word when somebody says, do as I say, not as I do.
Or not as I was told to do.
Do as I was done
That's the difference.
Well, irrelevant.
But he hasn't
benefited from it.
To me,
he shouldn't do that to other people and other parents who have to pay for it because that extra money, a lot of those kids will end up in state school. He won't get his $1 billion or whatever he thinks he's going to get because those 90,000 kids will go back into the state sector.
No,
and
they
then
won't.
Again, yes, they will.
All 90,000.
All
90,000. That's scaremongering.
A lot of the kids who...
You should qualify it with a lot then, rather than all 90,000.
Wait, 90,000.
It's going to end up in reducing educational standards throughout the country. It really is. The general level of education is going to drop.
It's not all 90,000.
If we don't keep these amazing schools which have charitable status.
It is.
It's not ridiculous.
It's scaremongering.
Oh, yeah, OK, I just made a mistake.
Well, there you go, then. It was a ridiculous error.
She's fallible.
You're ridiculous.
And I'm ridiculous,
too. You are
too.
absolutely ridiculous.
She's a woman.
Yeah, no, what I meant, and let me just clarify that, actually, what I meant was, it's 90,000 people who go to private schools, not the 90,000. Look at you, so smug.
Sure.
You got it wrong. I just mean education, but I won't. In the break.
Education at the moment is like all the national... It's just a nationalised industry, state education, and it's absurd.
And Narinda wanted to take it from the NHS. The NHS is on its arse.
Oh, well.
sorry.
For that word. We do apologise for that.
I apologise too.
Thank you. Right, let's welcome some of our great British voices on the show. Their opportunity to join, get on board and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing today. I've got 3 of them. Right, let's start with Brian Duggan. Brian, are you there? Are you there in Solihull? Let's see if he's there. Yes, you are, Brian. He's the biggest face on the screen. You're too close to your camera. Put your head back a bit.
I'll try and go back.
It's a lovely face, but it's massive. Brian, what do you think? What do you think? Is he a hypocrite?
I accept your point, Nana, which is well made, but I kind of side with Danny on this. I don't think it's hypocrisy as such. At the end of the day, he's now in politics, trying to decipher a way of an equitable reallocation or distribution of resources, and I think that's far more important than him personally, pinning it all on him because you went to a grammar school and therefore you were the beneficiary of such and such. I think, look, we absolutely need to level up. That's one of the key phrases now, and one of the primary ways we can do that is through education, and a better education for all. And I think a more equitable system whereby people who can afford it more then have to pay that little bit more. I think I'm not against that, I'm afraid.
Level up, not level down, though, because it doesn't make sense to me. Alan McNeely, you're there in Grimsby. What do you think?
Afternoon, Nana. Afternoon, folks. I think Starmer's a hypocrite, but it's across the board. He's hypocritical about just about everything. But his plan to tax the private schools just seems to me to be utter madness. Lots of people who go to private schools aren't that well off. It's their family that work hard to put them through private school and give them a better opportunity. The fact that they've got charitable status means that they're conducting work either in other schools or out within the community that allows them to have that charitable status. And if he takes the money away from them, if he takes that status away from them, many children will have to go back into the state sector. That will increase the bill on the state sector. So I just think it's a really stupid policy. If you've got a good education system, keep it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan McNeely. Let's go to Seshni in Bedford, or Milton Keynes even. Seshni.
Good evening, Nana. Good afternoon, Nana. Thank you for having me on. Nana, he is not a hypocrite. There's 2 separate issues, and we need to understand those both issues. The one is he wants to make education equal and equalize it for all children, and every child has a right to that education. And the second issue is that he has been on the receiving end of private education, which is actually the reason. I think we're looking at it in the wrong way. The reason why he actually wants to do it is because he knows how unfair the current system and the divide between the education of private and state schools.
Well, listen,
and
Seshni,
I think it's admirable of him.
Yeah, Admiral, he's a hypocrite. Thank you very much, Seshni. He's a hypocrite. Turn her mic down. Alan in Grimsby and also Brian in Solihull. Lovely to talk to you all. Right, now, this story caught my eye. He's a total hypocrite. Now, this story caught my eye. So it seems once again the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has been brought into the frame, and this time to broker a deal with Prince Harry, because apparently King Charles wants Harry, and that means Meghan as well, at the coronation. Well, you can't blame him for wanting his prodigal son to return. Well, this isn't the first time, of course, because the Archbishop has been dragged into controversy. When the Duke and Duchess of Montecito, remember the soap opera surrounding the Sussexes, when Meghan claimed in the Oprah interview that she'd secretly been married before the official wedding? Well, this wasn't, of course, the case. So, what do you think? Should he broker a deal? Do you think, Christine? Should he broker a deal should the Archbishop broker a deal and get Harry to come?
The arch-bedwetter of Canterbury. Well, I mean, the first thing he should be doing is attending to his dwindling flock in the Church of England. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. He needs to start giving a bit more leadership. But let's put that on one side. No, I don't think Harry should be at the coronation. Prince Charles, as you say, has been very welcoming, prodigal son, and has said the invitation is there, and I think if Harry's got any sense, he will find some way to not be there. Whatever he does, if he's in this country, he will draw attention away from what should be. All the attention should be on the King and the Queen Consort and the coronation. The spectacle of the whole thing will be amazing. I mean, you know, most people are lucky to get one coronation in their lives. I will have two if I survive until May. So I think
you will, Christine.
I don't think the Archbishop.
Oh, I hope he does come just for the television.
Oh, no.
I really do. William is worried that he's going to pull a stunt. I have visions of him stripping to a T-shirt, superglue himself to the balcony. Just stop Camilla, and a big bat. Just stop Camilla, and that's what I hope happens, just for the entertainment.
It won't happen.
It won't happen.
That's not going to happen. And he wants an apology as well, which
he ain't
shouldn't happen. Right, it's now time for Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. Joining me, if you've just tuned in, is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right, Danny, we'll start with yours. Go on. Go on quickly.
OK, quickly. Chip shops. If you can get fish and chips right, you'll earn £1 million. In Liverpool, Scousers are still talking fondly of the best food in Liverpool that people still can forget. It's in the Dingle area, which is a real working class area, and people used to queue around the block, particularly on a Friday. Big Catholic contingency in my home city. And of course, if you get fish and chips right, you'll earn £1 million. And people still it's been closed 20 years. People still talk about it. And that's from the Liverpool Echo.
I love fish and chips. Good fish and chips, you can't beat it, but bad fish and chips is disgusting.
Yeah, you won't find a queue in a bad fish and chip shop.
No.
You only go once.
Yep.
You only go once. Christine, what have you got?
Well, what caught my eye was the ultimate proof that GCSEs are heading in only one direction. Harry Styles. Harry Styles is on the syllabus for the GCSE. His solo single, Adore You, is now on the media studies
I love
course.
that song.
But it shouldn't be on the media. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. Nobody in their right mind should opt to study Harry Styles in to get an academic qualification. It's going to be laughed out of court by anybody. Other pop stars apparently on the media studies course are Beyoncé and somebody called Tiny Temper.
Tiny Temper, yeah.
Is that a tribute act for Beyoncé?
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Beyoncé.
And the excuse is that
Beyoncé tribute act.
The excuse is that it keeps them relevant, but it's absolutely ridiculous. It's dumbing down.
Who would you study if you could, if it was like...
Well, if you're on an English course, you should start by studying the historical greats, whether that's Bronte, Shakespeare, etc., and current things.
Give me one that you would study.
Not a...
What, a course?
Star.
Maths.
Oh, God. Right, he's not listening.
Maths on English.
Listening.
Oh, you're talking about English? I wasn't listening, really.
No, he wasn't listening to anything. Right, finally, on to my supplement. A producer of an acclaimed woke Australian play has banned white critics from reviewing it. Now, they demanded that all reviewers be people of colour. Surely everyone should be allowed to criticise a play. What do you think?
That's mental. That's mental.
That's madness, isn't it?
No, well, that's racism.
Well,
that's discriminatory. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah,
sorry. In Liverpool, there was a pantomime, and they had to stop halfway through because there wasn't a person of colour in Liverpool. It was a big story in the Northwest, and they had to have representatives, and people were saying it's racist. And I was thinking to myself, what's wrong with you? Suspend this belief, please, for 2 hours, because when you get back home, you turn the telly on, don't worry, there'll be plenty of adverts with plenty of black faces on it.
Well, listen, the play was written by a British playwright, Jasmine Lee Jones, and it's about two young black women reacting to the claim that Keeping Up with the Kardashians reality star is the world's youngest self-made billionaire. So it's just interesting. But it's just very silly, isn't it? People have gone a bit mad with the whole racism thing. I think they've got to start looking at people as people rather than focusing on the colour. And I actually think that the more they talk about it, the more they indoctrinate a racist narrative.
And what annoys me is when they take an historical play or whatever and they put a black or coloured actor in the place of what is historically a white person. I mean, it's like having...
Well, I don't care about
It's like having a white Othello. The play doesn't work. And if you have a black Desdemona, the play doesn't work.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it should matter at all. I think that the colour of it and everything, you can suspend disbelief in a theatre production.
But if it's an historical story...
I was in Kindertransport, and I was one of the refugee-type people. And my mum was white, and, my family, and my family were all white, but I was supposedly, related to these people.
But there's loads of black Jews. Loads of...
No, but I was supposedly related to the people who I was with. So, anyway, let's move on. Right, on today's show, we've been asking, can you trust the Tories? According to our Twitter poll, 21% of you say yes. 79% of you say no. That is pretty tragic, isn't it? Because nobody seems to be able to trust any of the politicians. Well, I've got to say thank you so much to my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Christine, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And also broadcaster and journalist and car dealership salesperson Danny Kelly.
Thank you for having me.
Did I get it right?
A rose amongst thorns, I feel today. Thank you for having me.
You a rose amongst thorns?
I'm a rose amongst thorns.
Yes, he's the rose, we're the thorns.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, and thank you to you at home for your company. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back at 4 p.m. on Saturday. I'll leave you with the weather. Have a good week.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Hope your weekend has been going all right. As we bring it to a close, there are 2 cold fronts across the UK. This one in the far south is a fairly weak feature, just bringing some patchy outbreaks of rain to southern Wales and southern areas of England. This one in the north, pushing into Scotland's Northern Ireland, has a bit more substance to it, so there are some longer spells of rain as it continues southwards into the evening, but that too will tend to fizzle out later on in the night. Behind that, we will see some clearer intervals develop, but also showers pushing in for Scotland. These will be heavy in places with hail, snow, down to around 400 metres over the mountains as well. A fairly brisk night for all of us with the winds, so frost is not too much of a worry as a result of that. Towns and cities around 4 degrees Celsius, but perhaps down a bit lower than that in some sheltered areas. Otherwise, once we move into the start of Monday, a lot of sunshine to be had for many of us. There will be a bit of cloud lingering in the far southwest to begin with, and the breeze just will remain a bit strong in the northeast as well, but not too bad of a start to the new working week. Temperatures will be around 9, maybe 10 degrees across southern areas of England, but it will be noticeably cooler tomorrow than today across parts of Scotland. During the afternoon and into the evening, we'll then see the cloud push in across Northern Ireland and then later into Scotland as well, further outbreaks of rain coming through here. And Monday night is relatively a repeat pattern of Sunday night, where we see that next band of rain pushing southwards again, fading out and turning patchier as it eventually moves across areas of Wales and into central southern England, with showers, blustery showers, following behind for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That cold front will continue to push its way southwards into Tuesday, but behind that we get another squeeze in the isobars, bringing some fairly strong winds to Scotland as we move overnight Tuesday and into Wednesday. So there is a yellow warning in force for that. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.